Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral, well-caffeinated, non-red-shirting weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and the angst and elation that comes with it. I'm Eric Hansen. He's Tyler James. Neither of us is Olivia Miles, who just recorded a triple-double for the ND women's basketball team. But what we can and will bring you are some important status updates from Irish head football coach Marcus Freeman's press conference today. And on the eve of the first college football playoff rankings of 2024, we'll look at how the AP poll ranked the Irish and what we might expect from the selection committee in its rankings beyond some mind-numbing TV pattern leading up to it. Tyler will break down a huge recruiting weekend ahead for the Irish while I nod like I know what I'm doing. And we'll take your questions live as we always do, so start filling up the queue. This is Football Never Sleeps.
All right. As you should know by now, Football Never Sleeps is presented by MyBookie. A bye week Sunday gave me an opportunity to watch even more NFL games this past weekend. Unfortunately, I gathered with some friends to watch a pathetic performance by the Chicago Bears. But before I did that, I spent some time on MyBookie. That's because MyBookie is the one book that has your back. No fluff, no second guessing, just straight up action with the decision in your hands as you're looking for an edge. Maybe you have your eyes on a home underdog, or you really like the over on a game total. MyBookie has what you need to make a good wager. And MyBookie has hooked us up with a deal for our Football Never Sleeps viewers. You can sign up using the promo code INDS to double your first deposit of up to $1,000 with a 100% deposit bonus. Click the link that's in our video description below, and remember to use code INDS to take advantage of this incredible deal. But anything, anytime, from anywhere with MyBookie, the sports book that gives you control. Before we get the show rolling, let's make sure that you are subscribed to us here on the YouTube channel, which is free. That allows you to get questions in during the show and make sure you don't miss any of the content that we're rolling out. You can also sign up for a 30-day free trial to InsideNDSports.com with promo code NDYT. That gets you access to our premium analysis and recruiting coverage and special access to us over on the Insider Lounge, where we spend a lot of our time. Our community shares all their opinions, and we drop our inside information there first. Appreciate everyone for chiming in tonight. Eric Swope, Jeff Stevens, Irish fan, Scott Fegan, good to see you all. We want to hear from everyone else in the comments as well, even if you're watching on replay too. Let's hear those opinions that you have, especially about the pattern of my shirt. Now let's have a good show, Eric.
We got comments on our haircuts. Our haircuts.
I just trimmed up the beard and the sideburns a little bit. Otherwise, I left the rest of the hair as is. So our opening drive tonight is Notre Dame dropping in the AP poll, the poll that Eric is a part of. While the Irish were idle, Notre Dame dropped 2 spots from number 8 to number 10, with Indiana replacing Notre Dame at number 8 and BYU staying at number 9. Eric, were you surprised that the Irish dropped, and where did you have Notre Dame ranked?
I was surprised that they dropped a little bit, even given some of the context around why the drop might have happened. They went up a spot in the coaches poll. They also went up a spot in the Football Writers National Football Foundation poll that I voted in a couple years before I went back to the AP poll. So I was a little surprised. I didn't say, oh my gosh, are people drinking when they're filling out their ballots? I could see the Texas A&M game affecting the perception of Notre Dame, and also Rice beating Navy by double digits, I think, also affected the perception of Notre Dame. From a positive standpoint, Louisville beating Clemson handily on the road probably helped Notre Dame a little bit, but not enough to keep them in the number 8 spot. And I had them number 6. I had them number 7 the week before. I moved them up. I had them ahead of Penn State, which had lost. And my rationale for that is, the Northern Illinois loss is a lot worse than losing to Ohio State. But in terms of overall resume, which you got to look at the whole thing, what's Penn State's good win? They don't really have a great win. They don't have a win over somebody as good as Texas A&M. So you kind of look at it, and I split the difference there. But I could understand why people would think Penn State is the better team.
Yeah, Penn State to me feels a little bit like what a lot of people perceive Notre Dame as being when Notre Dame has a good record, but maybe hasn't had a lot of marquee wins. If you look back at Notre Dame's last two playoff runs to the playoff, that maybe a Penn State resume might be something like that. So I'll be curious to see what happens with Penn State throughout the rest of the season, although I don't know that they're going to get challenged a lot. But whatever happens to them in the playoff, and maybe we get to see a Penn State Notre Dame playoff game, that would be an interesting result as well.
There will be a common opponent too. USC is a common opponent. Penn State narrowly got by them out in Los Angeles by 3 points.
Yeah, and in the same location as well. Although we'll see what sort of team USC puts on the field in its last game of the season. How many of those guys are still fighting on for the Trojans? But how do you think this first college football playoff ranking that we'll see on Tuesday night will differ from the AP poll or even your ballot?
Well, there's been 10 of these, and Notre Dame has been ranked 8 times in the first one. They weren't ranked in 2016 or 2022. And then of the 8 that they were ranked, they only matched up to the AP poll twice. That was 2019 and 2020. So I do think there will be a difference. And a lot of times it's been several place difference, as many as 4 places down and 3 places up. I think, again, some of it depends on what the committee thinks of Texas A&M. And because that's going to be a heavy weight in terms of how Notre Dame is looked at. I don't think the Northern Illinois loss will hurt them as much as some people think it might, just because in past years, and again, the committee changes and their thinking evolves over time, but we haven't seen a lot of penalties for bad losses. They're more interested in who you beat. And Notre Dame does now have 2 top 25 wins. So if I had to guess, I do think they'll be higher than 10th, maybe 8 or 9. But I do think they'll be higher than 10th based on, I think the committee will have given them 2 top 25 wins. And you don't anticipate that Army's coming up. You don't even look ahead. You just look at what's happened.
Bob Alvey says BYU got a bump with the SMU win. I suspect SMU will be ranked above ND tomorrow night. Would you be surprised if SMU was ahead of Notre Dame?
I would be. Again, their only loss is a 3-point loss to BYU. There's going to be some points of comparison there. They both beat Louisville by the same amount. But SMU, what's their best win? Their best win would be Clemson. Would that be the best win, I think? So I still think that Texas A&M win is better than the Clemson win, but I think SMU is going to probably be in the high teens. I don't think they'll be higher than Notre Dame.
SMU has not played Clemson.
Okay.
I don't know if you were saying they would meet in the ACC title game, but they've beat Pitt.
No. I got confused.
Yeah, Pitt and Louisville would be their 2 best wins.
Right. So they don't have a win that's comparable to the Texas A&M. But again, you have to look at everything. They crushed Pitt. And
they crushed Florida State back in late September, and we'll see what Notre Dame does against Florida State this weekend.
North Carolina just crushed Florida State.
Yeah, who was crushed by James Madison. So that tells you the state of the Florida State season. So,
right.
All right. Next, let's get to our injury report from Marcus Freeman today. We spoke to Marcus Freeman for the first time.
I hope I'm less confused about the injuries than I am SMU's schedule off the top of my head.
No, that's not your problem for not having SMU scheduled memorized. I don't hold that against you, and I imagine Bob doesn't either. The injury report today for Marcus Freeman, we spoke to him for the first time since the Navy game. He gave us some updates on injured and unavailable players. The Irish have 2 players listed as questionable: kicker Mitch Jeter and defensive end Logan Thomas. How badly do you think the Irish need Mitch Jeter to get back into the lineup?
I think they need him by the Army game. Army and USC, I could see field goals being really important in those 2 games, and maybe long field goals in those 2 games. With Florida State and Virginia, I'm not as concerned. It sounded like, just reading between the lines or listening between the lines, that he's pretty close. But I think I would err on the side of caution and try to get him ready for Army.
Yeah, you would hope he's close, considering before the last 2 games, they're like, well, he's going to try it in warm-ups and see how it goes. But we haven't really seen that really happen or come to fruition or mean that he's going to play. So you would think another 2 weeks should get him in position to be able to play. But yeah, it's a matter of, do you push it? I would imagine if and when he does come back, that maybe he's not given the kickoff duties to take some of the workload off of his leg. But I think that Notre Dame needs him back for field goals, because Zach Yoakum has been capable in some moments, but I don't know that he's going to be able to be someone that you have a lot of confidence in on longer range field goals, and at least to the extent that you would with Jeter.
Right. Army's defense has played so well, much better than Navy's had up until the point Notre Dame played them and beyond. And so the field goals may figure into that game more.
Yeah. And then the other person was Logan Thomas. What's the impact of the loss if he is out?
I would think that'd be more on special teams.
Yeah.
He hasn't played a ton of defensive snaps. It looks like they've pretty much committed, other than the Navy game where they wanted to play Junior Tuihalamaka and Josh Burnham together. Now that they're going back against conventional defenses or offenses for the next 2 games, they've got them basically on the same side, with Josh actually scheduled to start the Florida State game this weekend. So I don't know that they'll miss him terribly in this game, but boy, you want all the extra bodies at that position that you can have.
Yeah. Yeah, special teams. I think he's among the top snap getters on special teams for Notre Dame. So he plays a few different special teams roles. So that will be the biggest place to replace him if he does miss the game. 2 players are out, though not listed on the injury report. Quarterback CJ Carr with an elbow injury, and defensive tackle Jason Onye remains away from the team due to personal reasons. Let's touch on Carr first. What did we learn about his recovery today?
We learned that it's not going to require surgery, that they're being super, super cautious with him in terms of bringing him back slowly and deliberately. And it doesn't sound like this is something that's going to linger much longer. And certainly, I mean, he's not in line to see game snaps, although there's some of these games could get out of hand in November where Notre Dame gets a 3rd or 4th quarterback into the game. But the good news is there's nothing that looks like it's sinister enough to keep him out of competition in the spring to be the starter in 2025, which I think is what Notre Dame is most interested in this point, not getting him a few more game snaps this year.
Yeah, and Jeff, I think it was Jeff Stevens. Yeah, better. He said better for CJ Carr just to redshirt this year. Has he played 5 games?
He's played 1 game, and so the redshirt rule, as rewritten this summer, is 4 regular season games and then the entire postseason. So if your team plays 4 postseason games, you can play in 8 games. So 4 regular season, the entirety of the postseason. He's played in 1. So he could play up to 3 more regular season games. He's not playing this week, so they can throw caution to the wind. In fact, the lead to my notebook is where all the freshmen stand in that red shirt status. There are 8 of them that have already crossed the line that they can't redshirt at this point. There's 8 players that haven't played in a single game. 2 of them are out for the year. So of the 6 that are healthy, they don't have to count and be careful. There are some guys that are getting close to that 4 number. Gary Lambert is one. Do you want to redshirt him? guys like that. Teddy Rezak's another one. So there are 7 guys, and Carr is one of them that are in that 1 to 4 game range.
All right. And did it sound like Jason Onye would be returning to the team anytime soon?
It doesn't sound like they have any idea, and it doesn't sound like it's going to happen soon. I asked about that today in the press conference, and Marcus just said, our thoughts are getting him the help he needs. These are personal reasons. We don't know what they are. They're not public. But it just doesn't sound like there's a timetable for when he would return.
Yeah, I know we've gotten a lot of questions about that, and I know folks want to know everything that's going on in Jason Onye's life, but right now it's being kept private for personal reasons, and if and when he wants to discuss that, we'll let you know what he wants to tell us. One more injury update, I guess a couple more injury updates, but one in terms of a player returning from injury. Freshman Tay Johnson hasn't played this season due to a left foot injury, but he returned to practice last week and is now a cornerback in the immediate future after being recruited as a safety. What do you think we should expect from Johnson to finish the season?
Well, I'll tell you, I had a chance to interview him this summer, and he was pretty excited. He had just been cleared from a shoulder injury, and then he has a foot injury and has missed the first 8 games. And so I think we'll see him. I think they're going to want to work him in and get him ready in case there is another injury at cornerback. We may see him on special teams too. He came in as a safety. They thought about, okay, well, let's see what he might be able to do at nickel. Maybe he could be the backup nickel. And now he is a boundary cornerback, and he is an amazing athlete. He played very little safety in high school. He played a lot of quarterback, played a lot of wide receiver. He is such a gifted athlete and works so hard and just adapts so well. He has the skill set to do that. So again, I think that they would like to get him some reps, especially in games where it's not really tight, where they can work him into some medium leverage situations. What do you think? Do you think they'll get him in there? They don't have to worry about redshirting him now because
I think they have to find reps for both him and Carson Hobbs because they are the guys that are next in line if something else happens. I would imagine that those reps will be in less stressful moments in the immediate games, and would only be in high leverage situations if needed to be. I think, yes, I agree that Tay Johnson is a heck of an athlete, and I'm interested to see what he could do at cornerback. But like it's first and foremost a reflection of the lack of bodies available at cornerback. I don't think that this would have been a move that would have happened unless they absolutely needed some corners right now. So I don't have like high expectations that he would be like Leonard Moore 2.0 if he was thrown in there. But they have some opportunities now to get him ready, especially because we're talking about a guy, like you mentioned, he missed time with his shoulder. He missed time with his foot. So like how much is he ready to play football at any position that he's like the most comfortable at, let alone a new position? So it would be very impressive if he were to get out there at cornerback and look natural. And Notre Dame has some time to try and get him as close to natural as it can in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I guess the one thing I like about him again is he adapted to whatever his high school team wanted him to do, and he just has the skill set to do a lot of things well. But you're right. I mean, it's not going to be Leonard Moore 2.0. Carson Hobbs isn't even Leonard Moore 2.0.
Right. Yeah. We also got an update on an injured player's future who is that Marcus Freeman gave us. That's Viper Jordan Botello, that he intends to return for next season. How big is that for the Irish?
I think it's tremendous. We're not sure about his timetable. He did not have an ACL tear. It was, I believe, a patella tendon. It wasn't an ACL. I don't know if I assume that's a little bit shorter of a recovery. Marcus did one of the press conferences a few drew the line, said no, it wasn't an ACL. But yeah, I mean, because Boubacar Traore did tear an ACL, and it was the week after,
right?
And so you're not quite sure about his timetable. So yeah, having Botello coming back, boy, that's great. That gives you a lot of flexibility. I mean, you may be able to move Josh Burnham back over to that field end spot next year if the recovery goes well with Jordan Botello. I think that's great for Jordan. I think that's a smart move on his part.
Yeah, I think he was in a tough position given the injury. He was playing the best football of his career, and that injury wasn't going to allow him to sort of cash in on that with the NFL next season in the way that he would maybe hope to. So I don't even know like how much of an NFL decision it is, but like the fact that he's willing to stay at Notre Dame and keep playing for Notre Dame at that point of your career, it would be easy to just sort of kind of move on and try to do something else, whether it's playing somewhere else or playing in the NFL or even stop playing football. But I think everyone that knows Jordan Botello knows how much he loves football, so it's not surprising that he would choose to continue playing it, and will be an important piece for Notre Dame next year, and maybe eases or shortens the shopping list for Notre Dame in the transfer portal as it goes into the offseason. All right, let's hop into the question portal. Appreciate you guys sending in some questions. Scott Fegan says, will the O-line have any changes this week? We really need a strong effort by them to have a strong showing against Florida State. Florida State has a good pass rush.
Scott, you and me are on the same page because that was a question I asked today, and there are not going to be any changes. Marcus Freeman kind of did leave that open after the game, and that's one of the reasons I asked the question. But no changes in the offensive line. Yeah, they do need to, and they should. They with them getting used to Billy Schrauth being at that left guard position, it should raise the ceiling for that group. Florida State does have a decent pass rush. The other thing they do really well is they're the best net punting team in the country, and they punt a lot because their offense is in shambles. They scored 21 points in their opener against Georgia Tech, and what seemed like an upset at the time. They almost upset Georgia Tech, and then they have not scored more than 16 points in a game since then. They have a redshirt freshman and a freshman in their depth chart at quarterback right now with DJ Uiagalelei injured, and he wasn't playing all that well, but he was playing better than these two guys.
Yeah, the Florida State pass rush is talented, but I understand Notre Dame continuing to use the offensive line that it used against Navy. I thought they did a pretty good job against Navy. I feel like there's been a lot of restlessness as it relates to Anthony Knapp from the fan base, not necessarily from the program, because he's not an elite left tackle. Anyone who thought he would be an elite left tackle was getting way too far ahead of themselves.
They were getting over their skis, Tyler.
Yeah, getting over their skis. But hopefully Anthony Knapp isn't getting over his skis because they don't need any more injuries. But yeah, I think the line is in a good spot right now. Like, can they get better? Yes, but I think you want to see this unit now that Billy Schrauth is back in there, what they can do together. And I think Anthony Knapp has continued to improve as the season has gone on. He makes some mistakes here or there that make you sort of do a face palm, whether it's a holding penalty or a false start or something like that, or just a missed assignment.
Just demoing for people.
But I think it's smart. I think it's the right move to keep him in the lineup and take advantage of the experience that he's gained this season that the others that would be in line to replace him haven't received.
That's the gesture that Tyler does when I tell a joke in the press box. Tell a dad joke.
Brian Habermill asks, what grade would you guys give the receivers heading to November? What grade do you feel the receivers need going forward?
Brian, is this Marie from Atlanta? Tyler, I'll let you go first. Since the grades, I got to calculate that. My mind doesn't work like that. I'm not a grader.
I like, to me, like, you would need to give individual grades, but I don't want to try to do that on the fly. Because I mean, not every receiver I think probably deserves to have the same grade. I would, for the receivers as a whole, I would probably say B minus. I don't know that they would be lower if Riley Leonard was playing better and they were early in the season and they were playing poor, and limiting some of his opportunities. He did have some letdowns. There have been a number of drops. I think the receivers aren't always creating a ton of great throwing opportunities, but I think they have gotten better. I think the return of Jordan Faison is important for the offense. I think Chris Mitchell has started to settle in. Bo Collins has been the number one guy for the entirety of the season. But even Bo Collins, like, he's not, I don't know that he's like a feared wide receiver when you're doing the scouting report of Notre Dame. I think he's the one you got to make sure that you take care of, but and know that Riley Leonard's going to look his way a lot. But I think B minus would probably be where I would put them. Where do they need to get to going forward? I think B plus, A minus range would be acceptable. I mean, it depends on what you're hoping for. If you want Notre Dame to win some playoff games, they probably need to be in the AA plus range. But if you're talking about just winning out the rest of the season, I think they could have a B plus performance and be just fine as Notre Dame tries to win out to get a spot in the college football playoff.
Okay, I'll try to give it some context without giving a letter grade. I'll just copy off of his paper and give it a B minus, whatever you said. But I think there's some things that could help Notre Dame. I think we mentioned that during the bye week, there are 3 players that I think are just kind of coming into their own right now from roster injuries. And one of them's a wide receiver, and that's Jordan Faison. I think his speed on the outside and his consistency can raise the level of the whole wide receiver group. Riley Leonard's improvement in his confidence will in turn help the wide receivers. And then I think Billy Schrauth becoming a starter again and helping get the line, helping their play get better, that hooks into the receivers getting better and Riley Leonard getting better. And then the last piece is Mitchell Evans becoming Mitchell Evans again. He's not a wide receiver, he's a tight end. But I think all those elements help each other. So I think the grade, I don't think a note needs to go home to the parents. I think the B minus will be a better grade as we move into November. And it should be, other than Army's defense, they don't face a really good defense in November among USC, Virginia, and Florida State.
Yeah, and Army's defense is statistically good. It's to be determined how actually good they are against an opponent like Notre Dame.
Right, and their weaker suit is their pass defense.
All right, Eric Swope will use this question to transition into what I've been calling Narrative November. Eric asked, do you think Notre Dame will need to dominate the remainder of the schedule to make an impression on the committee, or will winning close games be enough?
Maybe winning a close game against Army might be enough. I think Notre Dame, if they want to improve where they stand in the rankings and improve potential seeding, I think they need to project as a team that's improving. And since they don't have maybe the competition that a lot of the teams they're competing with for those spots, they need to be dominant in the games. They need to, look more like they did against Georgia Tech or Navy than they looked against Miami in the first half, against Northern Illinois the whole game, as they did in some of the games in September. I do think it's really important that they project as an improving team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they don't need to dominate in order to get into the playoff. They need to dominate to improve their seed and make sure that they don't continue to get passed up by teams as the weeks go on, with teams playing maybe better competition. And I think the dominant fashion in which Notre Dame plays is important, especially against some of those teams that will be like opponents. Like Penn State played USC, so Notre Dame needs to have a lopsided win over USC if it can. Like, obviously, if you have to just win, you just win. Like, you don't always get a choice of the matter. You obviously want to blow out all these teams, but that doesn't always end up that way. Florida State, you don't want a close game to Florida State in your home stadium with the way Florida State has played. There are plenty of teams that have handled Florida State, and you need to do that. Army is more of an outlier because of like the way the game is played, and the lack of similar opponents. But I do think it would be impressive to see Notre Dame dominate them in the way that Notre Dame dominated Navy. As we've seen since the Navy win, that it could lose its luster quick, the way Navy played against Rice. But I think in the moment it matters what that team was playing like as well, because you could say, well, maybe what happened to Navy against Notre Dame helped Rice or put Navy in a bad position.
I watched some of that game. I do think Rice did take some pages from Notre Dame's strategy.
So yeah, I think I know people feel bad about that, but I think there are ways to spin that. Now, I don't think that's going to necessarily be the difference between whatever Notre Dame is ranked and the team that's below them or above them in the final rankings, but anything helps. And so these are the last 4 tests left on the schedule for Notre Dame to try to impress. All right, let's talk a little bit about that November schedule, Eric. To me, so much of what may impact Notre Dame's playoff seeding, as long as it finishes with 4 more wins, it will be what other teams on Notre Dame's schedule are doing elsewhere. Like, a lot of it feels like it's out of Notre Dame's control. But what do you think Notre Dame can do this month that will trump any of those outcomes?
I think the biggest thing, the biggest change is for their offense to continue to evolve. The more that people look at Riley Leonard and see an improving quarterback, the more they see that pass efficiency number come up, that Notre Dame's offensive numbers come up, that you say, wow, this is a team that has really good players and really good oomph on both sides, really good octane on both sides of the ball. Because you hear committee chairmen talk like that. I usually do the teleconference after they're done talking on TV and ask them some questions about Notre Dame, and I'll do that Tuesday night. And that's something that comes up, team balance. And if Notre Dame shows prowess on offense, yeah, now there's little things, smaller things to clean up. But for me, I think that's the biggest impression. I think that the committee's already, if they've been watching games, they're impressed with Notre Dame's defense. It's the offensive side of the ball. I know, Tyler, you have a more detailed list than I do, so I won't steal your thunder.
Yeah, I came up with 4 things that I think could really change some of the perspective or perception on Notre Dame, based on what it could do in November. Like, I think number 1 is the Riley Leonard stuff. Like, I think you need to see more continued consistency. I think we have seen consistency as of late with Riley Leonard, and passing game success. I think that can help maybe change the narrative around what Notre Dame's offense can be. I think sort of handily moving around that Florida State defensive line that is respected, even though the team record doesn't reflect that, could change the narrative around Notre Dame's offensive line. Like, is Notre Dame's how much of a question mark is Notre Dame's offensive line if it can really have a dominant performance starting this Saturday? If Army quarterback Bryson Daly gets back healthy, could Notre Dame shutting him down maybe change the narrative that part of the Navy outcome was so dependent on turnovers? I know at least for one member of the Insider Lounge, has been very stuck on the fact that Notre Dame needed so many turnovers to dominate Navy. And I think even with USC's record, that shutting down USC's passing game could maybe change the narrative around Notre Dame's thin cornerback depth, and like Christian Gray and Leonard Moore at that point of the year, maybe they aren't necessarily question marks at least as it relates to the quality of Benjamin Morrison. I don't know that people see them as bad players by any mean, but they're not necessarily first round draft picks next season. So if they can continue to do that throughout the month of November, I think all four of those things would be important in terms of maybe shifting some of the perception as it relates to Notre Dame this season. Did any of those stand out to you? But yeah, obviously, besides the Leonard one, as maybe the most important for Notre Dame?
Well, I think bits and pieces of all of them made sense. And when you're talking about narrative, it was interesting because I felt like the Navy Notre Dame game, there was a different narrative about Notre Dame. It was no longer, this team lost to Northern Illinois. It's like they've used Northern Illinois to be a mantra for them. And this is how different of a team they are from that Northern Illinois loss. And these are the reasons why. I think the committee will look at that. Now, again, it's too bad Navy went out and lost the next game, but you started seeing other national media people parroting what the announcers in the Navy game were saying about Notre Dame that was positive. So I think all those little elements are things that the committee adds up to, again, what they're looking at is this team in November markedly different or better than the one that maybe wasn't as impressive in parts of September? And I think you hit on them. And again, the Benjamin Morrison injury, Notre Dame has recovered from that pretty well to this point. And some of the other defections, but again, they can point to, well, Mitchell Evans wasn't himself early in the year. Riley Leonard, he was hurt in the spring. He was learning a new offense. I mean, all those things were part of the narrative in the Navy game. So, again, I think you did a good job of putting those together, and I'm glad that you did that. And I was able to work on my notebook.
All right. Question from Mike DeVoy. Is this the first time Gerby Lambert has moved up to the two deeps? And I do have an answer for this if you don't know that.
I thought he was there the whole time.
Yes, he was. He's been listed as the number 2 right tackle for the entirety of the season. So his spot on the depth chart has not changed.
He did not play in the Navy game. And I wonder, again, if they are thinking about redshirting him at this point, because a lot of reserves got in, and normally he would have played in that game, and he wasn't listed as unavailable for the Navy game either.
Yeah.
Why are you laughing? Did somebody tell a funny?
No. Just as if the being listed as unavailable would dictate whether or not he would or wouldn't play, because that hasn't always mattered. But yeah, Lambert's only played in 3 games. I think it makes sense to only use him in one more this regular season, unless it's in a situation where you need him, rather than you're playing backups at the end of the game. I think especially with the offensive line, I feel like that's one of the few positions where it's like, yeah, it's realistic that you could get a 5th season out of a guy, even if they're playing at a high level throughout their career. So especially with the history Notre Dame has at that position, I think it makes sense to be careful with his red shirt.
Changing pay structure coming up, compensation structure. I mean, it may be more attractive for guys to say, yeah, I'll come back for a 5th year.
Oh, I did not follow what you meant by that. I get it now that that there would be more guaranteed money available to you as a player in the future. Okay, sure. All right, Joshua Williams. How many interceptions does Xavier Watts end up with in the 2024 season?
I'd say he might get 2 more.
Yeah, I I'll go with 3 more, just to one up you. But no, I think Notre Dame has some opportunities to intercept. Probably in 3 of the last 4 games. Not you wouldn't expect there to be an interception against Army, but Army will throw it from time to time, but not a lot. So I think you could have one in each of the other games. That would be a high rate to hit at. But then I haven't said this yet, but I'm now to the point where I'm expecting Notre Dame to win out. I know I've said for a while now that I still believe that Notre Dame will lose one more time this season, but I'm convinced by the progress that Notre Dame has made, and by the lack of progress that its opponents have made, that Notre Dame will win out the rest of the regular season. So I'm counting on at least 5 more games this season for Notre Dame, and I think Xavier Watts can get 3 more interceptions in those games. All right, Scott Fegan asks, guys, my biggest concern going into next year is will we still have the same coaching group next year? I think we have a top 5 staff and would hate to lose some of them.
I mean, when you have really good assistants, that's a reality every year that you might lose some. The coordinators, I think, will be back. At least Denbrock will be back. And, Golden signed an extension, so I don't know that it would have to be something really exceptional for him to leave. And that could happen, as good as he is. Mike Mickens, I think, will get, offers dangled to be a defensive coordinator somewhere. Dylan McCullough always seems like he's in demand. So, yeah, I do think there will be the good thing is I think these guys like working for Marcus Freeman, but you want to move up in the profession. I think it's a natural evolution. And I think Marcus has done a good job of replacing good guys with good guys. The Mickens is the one I would hate to lose among the non-coordinators.
Yeah, I would agree that Mickens would be the top of that list. You would think that he has a good chance of being Notre Dame's next defensive coordinator after Al Golden, whenever that time comes. So maybe that keeps him at Notre Dame, but also he could also want to get that experience somewhere else, maybe separate himself a little bit from Marcus Freeman to have that experience there, which can work and also can backfire too. Like if you go out and you're not as good of a coordinator as you were a defensive backs coach, then maybe that it doesn't work out for you. But obviously that would be up to him to decide if he wants to do that. I think, I understand where Scott's coming from and saying that he would hate to lose some of them. I think if you were an elite program, you have to anticipate and believe and accept that you're going to lose your coaches because they're going to get promoted to better jobs. And the job of Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame is to be a destination for coaches to want to come. So if you lose a guy to a promotion somewhere else, you can get someone that deserves to be promoted to be in that role at Notre Dame. And maybe that happens. That would be, I think, to me, I believe Marcus Freeman has done a pretty good job in terms of hires. Offensive coordinator, maybe as the exemption, with the way particularly the Jared Parker hiring happened. That was weird on many fronts. But I think for the most part, Marcus Freeman has done a pretty good job at hiring assistants. And guys have really, I think, grown and evolved and proven their ability as coaches under Freeman. So I think he would have a pretty attractive case to try to hire someone. Mike DeVoy says, TV announcers often comment on the great job Al Golden is doing and wondering how no other team has grabbed him as a head coach. Do you think he aspires to be a head coach again?
I think he would consider it. I think when he came to Notre Dame, he had that thought in his mind that this could lead one of two ways. He could end up back in the NFL as a coordinator, or he could end up as a college head coach. I want to say he's in his mid-50s right now. And I think that he has enjoyed the Notre Dame experience so much. He's being pickier maybe with what's coming his way. I would think if he is going to do something other than what he's doing now, he would be an NFL defensive coordinator. I do not think he would want to deal with all the headaches that exist with being a college head coach right now, and him being kind of an old school guy. I think it's more than the new wave. They're like, yeah, NIL, no problem. But, for guys in Al's age group, and he's pretty close to my age group, I think they would rather not deal with those headaches. So the NFL, he loved the NFL.
Yeah, I would think, I don't know this for fact, but I would think that if Al Golden were convinced to be a head coach somewhere, it would have to be someone that he had extreme trust in the athletic director and the program and sort of the expectations and how things would be run. And I think Al Golden in college, as it relates to college football, I think he's best suited as a coordinator, as a guy that can, at this point of his career, can be leading a defense and pouring into those players. Maybe not having to be the most dynamic recruiter, like letting his resume speak for itself. Obviously, developing relationship with recruits, but having assistant coaches and other staff members sort of lead the relationship developing as it relates to the defensive players that Notre Dame is recruiting. So I think that he's probably in the best position he could be in right now in college football. So I would tend to agree with Eric that if he does become something besides that in the near future, it would be perhaps a defensive coordinator at the NFL level.
And one thing too, coaches' career goals change. I remember talking to Mike Denbrock when he went back to Cincinnati. When he went to Cincinnati, he had a chance to stay at Notre Dame after the 2016 season. He just wasn't going to be the offensive play caller. He would be the associate head coach, but Brian was going to bring in Chip Long to call plays. And Mike Denbrock at that time wanted to be a head coach, and he wanted to bet on himself by going to Cincinnati, by being a really good offensive coordinator, and then that would evolve. And then when we talked, when he was coming to Notre Dame, he's like, that's not even important to me anymore. I want to be a really good offensive coordinator, and I want to do it at Notre Dame, and I want to win a national championship at Notre Dame. So it changed over time. I think at some point, Al Golden wanted to be a head coach. I don't know that that's still there.
All right, Eric, let's start talking some recruiting. So tee me up and start nodding.
Okay, yes, I am going to pretend as if I know what all these things. I'll tell you, the thing that I really was surprised is that we had Derek Meadows' picture on the front page of our thing. So this is a big recruiting. Let me ask you in general terms, does this have an Appaloosa designation? Is this big enough to be recruiting Appaloosa?
Well, you're the one that hands that out, so I don't know that I could be the one to designate that. But yeah, I mean, I think it would warrant that. I think it's going to be one of the more important recruiting weekends across the country. And Notre Dame is going to have some serious star power on campus as it relates to the remaining targets in the 2025 class. And they're bringing in some talented players in the 2026 class, but certainly the most attention, at least from a headline standpoint, will be on those 2025 guys that Notre Dame will be hosting.
Okay, so let's talk about the big names. Who are the big names coming in?
Yeah, to me, the three big names are the two linebackers that Notre Dame has been recruiting for forever now, Madden Faremo and Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng. Faremo is a recent add to the visitors list. He visited for, I believe, the Louisville game earlier this season, and it still has not made up his mind yet. So he's getting back to Notre Dame for what I believe will be his fifth visit to campus. Notre Dame has long been considered top contender for Faremo. And so this is just another opportunity for Notre Dame to get him on campus and try to pull him away from USC being a California guy and maybe prevent Washington and Texas from making late runs at him. Owusu Boateng has been scheduled to visit Notre Dame for this game since earlier this year. So this isn't a new development, but a new chance for Notre Dame to get him on campus. There was a lot of confidence coming out of his official visit in June that Notre Dame would end up getting his commitment. That has not happened yet, but I still think Notre Dame could wind up getting him. Michigan, I think, is making a strong push there. Colorado hosted him for an official visit. I think Texas is in the mix there too. So it is a tightly contested recruitment there, but one that Notre Dame certainly has a chance to win. And then Meadows, like you said, he is the newest addition to the list. He's been committed to LSU since July. That was a long time Notre Dame target that the Irish sort of lost out on that recruitment, and has decided to start double checking on some places that he considered previously. He was at Michigan this past weekend for its loss against Oregon, and he plans to be at Notre Dame this weekend per our reporting on the Insider Lounge. He's I don't think it's necessarily going to be an easy flip for Notre Dame, but this I think sort of officially opens the door, despite there being communication with him for so long. Like, I think this is a real sign that he's giving thought to maybe not following through on his LSU commitment, and that's sort of the first step in trying to get him to flip. So obviously wide receiver has been a top need for Notre Dame throughout the recruiting cycle, really, but especially in these last couple months as Notre Dame finally got a third receiver in Antavius Richardson earlier and would like to get a fourth. And I'm not sure if they would stretch to 5 if a fifth would want in terms of Meadows and someone else, but I think it would be hard for Notre Dame to say no to Meadows if some other receiver committed first and then Meadows still wanted to come in. So we'll see how that all plays out.
I mean, are you surprised that this Meadows thing could happen, or is this just? I mean, if he's coming here, he's obviously interested, right? If he's coming for a visit.
Yeah. So what are you asking? Am I surprised he's interested?
Yeah.
No, it's not necessarily.
No, it's recruitment. This is the nuts that we go through all the time, right?
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Yeah, I mean,
what am I thinking?
It's someone that he obviously valued Notre Dame, and that was clear throughout. It didn't end up going that way. His commitment to LSU came at a time where there was, I think, some doubts about whether or not Deuce Knight would end up sticking with his Notre Dame commitment. I think there's also.
Would you be surprised if Deuce Knight came back?
Well, yes, that would be surprising. I to add some context to this for folks that don't follow recruiting for other schools, LSU has a top quarterback in their class from Michigan. Bryce Underwood is his name. And Michigan is reportedly throwing anything and everything at him to try to get him to flip. So people wonder if both of them will end up at Michigan, if one will end up at Michigan. So I think Meadows is keeping some options open here too, where whether if he's if I'm going
yawn. Football does yawn, it just doesn't sleep. Go ahead.
If I'm going to LSU, do I still want to do that if Bryce Underwood isn't going there? This is all conjecture. This isn't from Derek Meadows' mouth. I'm not sure that he's done any interviews recently, but I think that is helping maybe reopen the door a little bit in his recruitment.
Okay, now there's some potentially big flips if Notre Dame can do that. Who are they?
Yeah, a couple of 4-star recruits who Notre Dame has been monitoring for a while. To me, the more important one would be Jalen Wiggins, a Florida commit, defensive. He's ranked as a defensive end. I think he's more of a defensive tackle long-term. Notre Dame's been working on him for a long time. He was potentially going to make an official visit in the summer. Notre Dame took Gordy Solsted's commitment, and that sort of put a pause on things. And then Notre Dame's been keeping in touch as it's decided, well, maybe we have enough room for another defensive lineman. Wiggins is the number one priority as it relates to the defensive line. There haven't really been, at least publicly, recruiting anyone else. So this is Notre Dame's shot to try to flip Wiggins. He's a Tallahassee native, so someone that's certainly familiar with Florida State, and Florida's had a bit of an up and down season, so there's some thought there that maybe Notre Dame can pull him out of Florida. The other is tight end Andrew Olesh out of Pennsylvania. He's been committed to Michigan, remains committed to Michigan, but has been looking around as of late. He visited Alabama. He visited Oregon. He was at Penn State this past weekend. I think Penn State has probably the best chance to flip him, but Notre Dame, I think, can make some noise if it really decides to push for him as a second tight end for 2025 class.
And were you surprised that, Notre Dame, one tight end, two tight ends, it seems like they've gone back and forth a little bit in this cycle about how many they want.
Yeah, I think they've been a little wishy-washy there. And I think some of that is why Nate Roberts isn't in Notre Dame's class, because they had Nate Roberts and then we're going after Jade Flanagan. And then Nate Roberts is like, wait a minute, I thought I was the only one here. So Notre Dame has revisited that, and I don't know that they're fully sold on what they're going to do yet. I think there's been a lot of back and forth discussion from what I understand, if whether or not it's worth finding a second tight end in this class or trying to maybe find another tight end in the portal if necessary. But Olesh is one of the guys that they've circled as a possibility. DeAndre Waverly was someone who visited earlier this season as a potential tight end. And I'm a little bit curious if someone I haven't talked about yet, but Antoine Parham, who's committed to Tulane and is a wide receiver right now in high school, but he's 6'4", 198. If maybe he becomes a tight end long term, I don't know that that's what Notre Dame is looking at him but maybe could be what he ends up later in his college career.
Okay, and that takes us to new names. So you just named one of the new names. Who are the other new names?
Yeah, let me add some more details to Parham. Parham recently received an offer from Notre Dame and is going to make an official visit. He's been committed to Tulane since June, and from my understanding, hasn't been getting much other attention, it seems, but has been having a pretty good senior season down in Florida. He's from Coconut Creek Monarch, and it seems, at least on paper, like a less obvious fit for Notre Dame, but we'll see if that fit becomes more obvious once he gets on campus this coming weekend. And the other new name is running back Nolan James, not related to me. He's a Boston College commit who plans to make an official visit to Notre Dame this weekend. He's a 3-star running back from DePaul Catholic in New Jersey, where he's teammates with Notre Dame wide receiver commit Elijah Burris. Mike Brown was by the school during Notre Dame's first bye week, and Notre Dame has recently made the decision to push for James as its second running back and someone to replace Daniel Anderson. He's been committed to Boston College since December. He's had a productive senior season. He has 1,268 rushing yards and 14 rushing touchdowns in 8 games so far this year. I like Notre Dame's chances. It seems like a fit both on the field and his sort of high school resume. This is too big of a comparison, but the last time Notre Dame flipped a running back from New Jersey late in the recruiting cycle, it was Audric Estime, and that worked out pretty well. So we'll see if I don't want to put that kind of pressure on Nolan James, but I like him as a recruit. He's only a 3-star recruit, but a productive high school running back that I think has a chance to make a mark in college football.
Okay, I'm going to throw you a trick question because this will determine whether I'm going to call this a Recruitapalooza. You don't have to name them, but are there a bunch of 2026 guys coming to the game?
There are, yes. I think I don't have the list in front of me, but I think it's close to 10 targets in that class.
And good ones?
And good ones, yes. They are.
Okay, are they going to play Heaven is a Place on Earth by Belinda Carlisle at some point? Because this is the other fact. Okay, if they're not, then it is a Recruitapalooza.
All right, well, there we go.
They do, it ruins it for everything.
I'm interested to see what Notre Dame does. We haven't had a night game this year, so what happens between the third and fourth quarter what sort of light show. I would imagine there's going to be something that happens. What song is played? What video is played? That's night games are very important because not because of the light show, but because you get guys onto campus that are farther away. Like the guys from California, it's hard for them to get into Notre Dame, or because you got to, if you play Friday night, you got to get up early, and that's a long trip, and maybe you're not enjoying your time as much because you're tired. So a night game gives ample time for players to get in from across the country. I think that is one thing that maybe hasn't helped Notre Dame this season, that it only had one night game. And so all the eggs have been sort of pushed to this basket because it's the best opportunity to host a big weekend like this. Florida State didn't hold up its end of the deal in terms of making it a marquee game, but it's still going to be a marquee game from a recruiting standpoint.
Okay, very good. I'll let you wrap things up. I want to say one quick happy birthday to Piano Man Steve Lundgren, who does our Football Never Sleeps theme.
All right,
I don't know how old he is, though.
Let me get this one last question in here from Scott Fegan. He's curious about the long-term recruiting at, I believe, wide receiver. Do you feel that Carr is the quarterback next year and the offense moves to a more 50-50 run-pass offense? Could this help get the receivers we need?
I think recruits seeing Mike Denbrock's offense, if Notre Dame makes the playoff, I think it will be a good thing for wide receiver recruiting. I'm not stuck on that players weren't coming to Notre Dame in this class because Riley Leonard was the quarterback, because they're not even going to play with him. I do think CJ Carr will be the quarterback in 2025, the starting quarterback. And I think he's a good recruiter, but I think he can't be a statue. And I think he'll move around just fine. He'll just be he won't be the runner Riley Leonard is, but a lot of people aren't. But he has a chance to be, I think, a really, really good quarterback. So I didn't answer that very well. Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could provide a bump. I mean, regardless who the quarterback is, if they're playing well, like that's going to help and show like what the potential of the offense is. And you need a quarterback to be playing well for a receiver to play well. And so Notre Dame also needs some receivers to play well. Notre Dame rarely has 100-yard games for his wide receivers. I think the last one was Rico Flores last year, and he's no longer on the roster. So I think you need to have more passing game production to attract those wide receivers. I do think that doesn't help Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame isn't a place that guys sort of associate with big-time wide receiver play, whereas Ohio State is obviously the first one you think of. If you're not, at least that's my perspective. Maybe you think of Alabama or someone else, but I think Ohio State is sort of holds that crown right now in terms of wide receiver recruiting. And Notre Dame is way off in terms of that discussion right now, and needs both high-level quarterback play and wide receiver play. I think it needs to be more sustained than just 1 year. Like that would lend credence to, well, if CJ Carr starts impressing next year, then you're going to have him for another year, and so then it sort of builds upon itself. So I do think Notre Dame needs to tap into that, but also continue to recruit quarterbacks at a high level. Ben Hebert, Noah Grubbs, whoever's next after them. Notre Dame's got to do a few different things to keep improving on the wide receiver recruiting side of things. All right. Well, thanks for letting me ramble on there with one more recruiting question. As you all should know by now, it's always a good time to be a subscriber to InsideNDSports.com. Give us a try with our 30-day free trial. That's exclusive to our audience here on YouTube. That's promo code NDYT to get access to all of our premium coverage, whether it's football analysis or recruiting coverage. And you can hang out with us over on the Insider Lounge. Make sure you're subscribed to us here on our YouTube channel as well. If you made it through the show and have not subscribed, I'm very disappointed in you. Appreciate everyone for chiming in tonight. Our YouTube schedule for the week, we'll have our Inside ND Sports podcast uploaded on Thursday. Place your bets on Friday, and then Eric and I will share our post-game takeaways in the wee hours of Sunday morning, with Saturday night's game being a night game. And as always, check out our content on InsideEddySports.com and have a good week.